Our story begins with a young man named Rohan, who arrived from India to stay with his cousin in Brampton for just 2 weeks. New to Canada and unfamiliar with the city, Rohan relied entirely on his cousin and his family for guidance. He was placed in the care of Arjun, his cousin, and Maya, Arjun's wife. At first, the household seemed welcoming and ordinary, but subtle changes began almost immediately after Rohan's arrival. Late-night footsteps echoed through the house. Hushed whispers came from behind closed doors, and there was an unusual closeness developing between Rohan and Arjun, one that Maya found difficult to explain. Though Rohan appeared shy, polite, and soft-spoken, his presence disrupted the predictable routine that Maya and Arjun had maintained for years. Their life in a modest, semi-detached house had been structured. Arjun worked long hours at a logistics yard handling freight, while Maya managed schedules at a dental clinic. They followed a strict daily rhythm of work, dinner, household chores, and a brief period of television before bed. Any minor deviation in their routine was always noticeable. Everything changed the day Arjun received a call from Rohan's uncle in India. Rohan had been accepted into a short technical certification program in Ontario and needed temporary lodging for 2 weeks. Arjun agreed without hesitation, and Maya supported the decision as a simple family obligation. When Rohan arrived, he seemed overwhelmed by the cold weather and unfamiliar with the local systems. Maya prepared the basement room for him with extra blankets and a small heater. For the first week, Rohan focused on orientation, public transit, and paperwork. Meals were livelier, and Arjun seemed energized by guiding his cousin through the new environment. Maya found it all normal and felt reassured that everything was under control. But subtle shifts in Arjun's behavior soon began to emerge. After dinner, instead of joining Maya in the living room, he started spending more time in the basement under the pretext of helping Rohan with assignments or career guidance. Initially, Maya dismissed it as harmless, but over several nights, Arjun remained downstairs long past midnight. She often woke to soft footsteps moving below her floorboards, or quiet conversations she couldn't fully hear. When she asked later, the explanations were vague: assignment stress, course anxiety, or job market questions. Yet the basement had become a nightly routine for Arjun, a small change that planted the first seeds of unease in Maya's mind. Rohan, too, began acting differently around Maya. He became more reserved, careful with his movements, and visibly relaxed only when Arjun was nearby. Late-night whispers, the soft creak of doors, and minor irregularities like taking tea downstairs instead of in the kitchen started accumulating, forming a pattern Maya couldn't ignore. Small details she would have once overlooked: the colder side of the bed, hushed footsteps, unexplained takeout containers, began to suggest that something more serious was unfolding beneath her awareness. As the days passed, the tension in the household became increasingly tangible. Maya found herself noticing patterns she couldn't easily explain. Arjun's late-night visits to the basement became more deliberate. He didn't just check on Rohan briefly, he stayed for hours, often after Rohan should have gone to sleep. The soft footsteps, once an occasional curiosity, now felt like deliberate pacing. Occasionally, Maya would hear voices, low and measured, stopping abruptly whenever she approached the stairs. It was as if the two men were consciously adjusting their behavior to avoid her attention. Rohan's behavior reinforced the suspicion. He became tense whenever Maya came near the basement. His interactions with her were polite but distant, and his body language stiffened as if he were performing an intricate balancing act between being helpful and hiding something. Yet, when Arjun entered the space, Rohan visibly relaxed, sometimes even seeming relieved. Their coordinated movements, late-night communications, and secretive tone of voice hinted at a deeper connection that Maya couldn't yet name. One particularly unsettling morning, Maya noticed that Arjun's side of the bed felt colder than usual. When she asked, he mentioned an early jog, a plausible explanation. But when she checked, his running shoes were neatly aligned against the wall, exactly as she had arranged them the night before. The details didn't add up. Around the same time, Rohan began leaving the house early in the morning without explanation and returning late at night, moving quietly as though he didn't want to be noticed. Their coordinated routines and secretive exchanges created an atmosphere of tension that Maya couldn't ignore. Even small, seemingly innocuous events began drawing her attention. One night around 2 a.m., Maya passed the basement door to get a glass of water and noticed a thin beam of light slipping underneath. Seconds later, it vanished. While checking the fridge, she heard the faint click of a door being gently closed below. On another day, she found hidden takeout containers that neither she nor Arjun had ordered. The containers were placed under other household items, dates on the stickers showing late-night delivery. The consistent pattern of secrecy and concealment was unmistakable. Despite her unease, Maya initially tried to rationalize the behavior. Rohan was new to the country, stressed with studies and housing, and likely needed guidance. Arjun, as his cousin and host, was merely helping him adjust. Yet the accumulation of subtle anomalies, the colder bed, hushed whispers, hidden packages, and late-night basement activity, gradually eroded any sense of normalcy. She began observing quietly, waiting for any slip that might reveal the truth. It wasn't long before Maya's concerns reached a critical point. One evening, she stepped outside to bring in the garbage and saw Arjun talking urgently on his phone, partially hidden behind the side of the house. His tone was clipped, glances toward the driveway frequent, and the moment he noticed her, he ended the call abruptly. Later, she realized he had cleared the call log before placing the phone back on the counter. A small but telling sign that the secrecy extended beyond casual conversation. By this time, Maya understood that the dynamic between Arjun and Rohan was no longer simple guidance or mentorship. The tension, subtle coordination, and deliberate concealment indicated a hidden relationship that went beyond ordinary family bonds. She sensed that the truth was closer than she had imagined, and the unease in the house grew heavier with each passing day. In the final week of Rohan's intended 2-week stay, the household routine had shifted dramatically. Arjun's nightly trips to the basement continued, always extending well past midnight, and Rohan's movements became increasingly cautious and coordinated. Maya noticed the subtle signs: whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when she approached, careful avoidance of eye contact, and the faint rhythm of footsteps she had begun to recognize as deliberate pacing. Every small detail hinted at a secret, carefully maintained between the two men. One cold, overcast Thursday morning, Maya awoke to an unusual silence. Normally, she would hear Rohan moving about in the basement, preparing for his day. But this morning, there was nothing. Curious and uneasy, she walked toward the kitchen and noticed that Rohan's shoes were still neatly placed by the entryway. A rare anomaly for the young man, especially in the chilly weather. The basement door was slightly ajar, tilted in a way Maya had never seen before. Her voice called out to Rohan, first softly, then louder. But no answer came. Descending the stairs, Maya found the basement room meticulously tidy. Rohan's bed was perfectly made, the corners tucked in precisely, in stark contrast to his usual hurried mornings. A half-finished notebook lay open on the desk, filled with diagrams and partially written notes. His jacket and backpack, items he typically carried everywhere, were gone. Nothing appeared disturbed or out of place, yet the absence of Rohan himself created a jarring sense of alarm. Maya immediately sought answers from Arjun, who had already begun preparing to leave for work. When asked if he had seen Rohan that morning, Arjun froze. His hands paused mid-motion, his expression controlled yet tense. He finally replied that Rohan had left early for a group project at college. The words seemed rehearsed, delivered with a calm tone that only heightened Maya's suspicion. Hours passed, and Rohan did not return. Calls to his phone went straight to voicemail, escalating Maya's concern into urgent alarm. When she pressed Arjun to contact someone from Rohan's program to confirm attendance, his reaction was defensive and hostile. He accused Maya of overreacting, of seeking drama, and insisted she was turning a minor issue into chaos. His resistance was illogical. Rohan was new to the country, reliant on family support, and it was reasonable to check on his whereabouts. The escalation in Arjun's tone confirmed to Maya that something was gravely wrong. With her concern mounting, Maya made the decision to contact the police and report Rohan as missing. Officers arrived swiftly, asking standard questions about his last known movements, attire, and any medical or mental health concerns. They requested to inspect the basement, but Arjun stepped forward and blocked the entry, asserting that the officers had no right to enter private family spaces without a warrant. Though the interaction was tense, the police withdrew voluntarily, documenting Arjun's behavior in their initial report. News of Rohan's disappearance quickly spread. Family members across Ontario and India called, speculating on possible explanations. Rumors circulated about tension between Maya and Rohan or accusations of jealousy. Yet Arjun remained distant, silent, and strangely focused on the slightly open basement door. His detachment hinted at knowledge or guilt that Maya could not yet articulate. And for her, the situation had shifted from confusion to crisis. The following morning, detectives arrived with a judicial warrant to conduct a thorough search. Their investigation marked the beginning of a meticulous examination of the household and digital evidence, signaling that what had started as a missing person case would evolve into a far more complex and serious matter. With the judicial warrant in hand, detectives moved methodically through the Brampton home. Every detail was scrutinized, from the basement to the bedrooms, and all digital devices were seized for analysis. Arjun and Maya's phones, laptops, an external hard drive, the household router, and the small security camera mounted above the back entrance were collected. Maya recalled installing the camera months earlier after minor break-ins, never imagining it would become central to the investigation. Technicians began extracting metadata, timestamps, and communication logs. The router revealed repeated late-night spikes in activity between midnight and 3 a.m., corresponding to periods when the household lights were off. Two specific messaging applications, now deleted from both Arjun's and Rohan's phones, had been used consistently during these hours. The pattern of deletion suggested a coordinated effort to erase traces of communication. Investigators noted that these actions were far from accidental. Someone had deliberately concealed their exchanges. The footage from the security camera, though grainy and partially obscured by condensation, provided crucial insight. On one night, around 2:14 a.m., the video captured two figures, one matching Arjun's build, the other Rohan's height and posture, engaged in a heated confrontation in the backyard. Their gestures were sharp and rapid, suggesting more than a verbal disagreement. At one point, Rohan appeared to step backward abruptly, as if startled or pushed. Moments later, both figures moved out of view, leaving the frame empty except for snow and dim porch light. 3 minutes later, only Arjun returned, walking unevenly, appearing winded, and with trembling hands. Investigators flagged this behavior as highly irregular for what he claimed was a routine interaction. Expanding the search, officers followed a narrow path leading to a drainage ravine behind the property. There, they discovered disturbed soil, patches of debris, and drag marks. Behind dense branches, they found a torn strip of dark fabric matching Rohan's jacket lining. The terrain suggested movement through rough underbrush and possibly the ravine itself. These findings linked the backyard confrontation to a potential physical struggle and placed Rohan in immediate danger. Back at the station, detectives began comparing the digital evidence to Arjun's earlier statements. His explanations were inconsistent with phone activity, router logs, and timestamps from the security footage. Initially, he claimed stress had caused him to misremember details, but as investigators presented precise data, his responses became incoherent. Under increasing pressure, he admitted that his relationship with Rohan had become complicated, describing emotional dependency, secret conversations, and anxiety over being discovered. He confessed that the argument captured on camera escalated when Rohan threatened to reveal the nature of their relationship. Investigators now treated the case not merely as a missing person report, but as a potential incident involving foul play. Deleted messaging apps, coordinated late-night communications, and backyard confrontations suggested deliberate concealment. Maya, meanwhile, watched quietly from home as her suspicions were confirmed. Arjun had indeed been hiding significant details from her, and the depth of secrecy went far beyond what she had imagined. This marked a turning point in the investigation. Detectives understood that uncovering the truth required not only physical evidence, but also a meticulous reconstruction of digital activity, behavioral patterns, and interpersonal dynamics. Every late-night exchange, deleted app, and evasive response became critical to understanding the events that had led to Rohan's disappearance. As search teams focused on the drainage ravine behind the property, conditions were challenging. Thick underbrush and uneven terrain made every step difficult, but investigators pressed on, guided by the initial sweep's findings. Late in the afternoon, a team member spotted fabric partially submerged downstream. When examined, it was identified as part of Rohan's jacket lining. Following the current, they found his body lodged between fallen branches along the water's edge, suggesting he had been carried some distance by the stream. The scene was carefully documented. Drag patterns in the soil, the slope of the ravine, and nearby vegetation were photographed for evidence. The discovery confirmed that Rohan's disappearance had escalated from a missing person case to a fatal incident. Investigators treated every detail, disturbed soil, torn fabric, and the position of the body, as critical to reconstructing the events that had led to his death. The autopsy the following day revealed a blunt force impact to the right side of Rohan's head. The injury suggested a sudden force, consistent with a fall or being struck against a hard surface. While no defensive wounds were noted, indicating the confrontation may have been brief, the timing of the injury aligned with the confrontation captured on the security footage. The pathologist's report confirmed that the impact occurred close to the time of death, linking the physical trauma to the recorded backyard altercation. Based on these findings, prosecutors determined that the evidence supported a manslaughter charge rather than murder, as there was no clear indication of premeditation. However, they emphasized the sequence of concealment and evasion following the incident. Arjun had deleted messaging applications, sanitized his call logs, avoided cooperation during the initial welfare check, and provided explanations contradicting digital evidence. These actions demonstrated awareness of wrongdoing, even if the fatal act itself was not planned. During formal interviews and pre-trial preparation, Arjun admitted that his relationship with Rohan had developed secretly and escalated to a point where he felt trapped. He expressed fear that exposure would destroy his marriage, bring shame to his extended family, and jeopardize his career. He described weeks of emotional pressure that clouded his judgment. When the argument in the backyard reached its peak, he admitted to pushing Rohan, but claimed he did not anticipate the severity of the outcome. Throughout this period, Maya observed quietly. She attended court proceedings and listened as timelines, messages, and digital traces were presented. Each detail confirmed the suspicion she had long harbored: deleted apps, late-night communications, and secretive behavior between Arjun and Rohan. The courtroom testimonies illuminated the full scale of deception within the household, revealing a tension and secrecy that had escalated beyond recognition. The combination of physical evidence, digital records, and Arjun's partial admissions transformed the case into one centered not just on Rohan's death, but on deliberate concealment and evasion. The investigation had moved from suspicion to confirmation, and the legal process was now poised to determine accountability for both the fatal incident and the subsequent attempts to obscure the truth. The trial began with a detailed presentation of the evidence collected over months of investigation. Prosecutors meticulously outlined the sequence of events, starting with Rohan's arrival, the growing secrecy between him and Arjun, and the pattern of late-night communications that Maya had first noticed. They emphasized that while the fatal altercation might not have been premeditated, the deliberate concealment and manipulation of evidence demonstrated Arjun's awareness that something unlawful had occurred. Digital evidence played a central role. Logs from the household router, timestamps of deleted messaging applications, and the coordinated late-night activity between Arjun and Rohan's devices illustrated a calculated effort to avoid detection. Investigators highlighted how Arjun had cleared his call logs and repeatedly installed and removed apps to hide communication with Rohan. Prosecutors argued that these actions reflected not only awareness of wrongdoing, but also a conscious attempt to obstruct justice. Security footage from the backyard was replayed in court, frame by frame. Jurors saw the confrontation, the abrupt movements suggesting physical escalation, and Arjun returning alone minutes later, visibly winded and unsteady. Forensic experts explained the blunt force injury to Rohan's head and linked it to the timing of the confrontation. While the injury itself could have been accidental in the heat of the moment, the surrounding context, behavioral changes, secrecy, and evasive actions, painted a fuller picture of culpability. Witness testimony added depth to the prosecution's case. Maya recounted her observations. The late-night whispers, the sudden shifts in Rohan's behavior, and the growing closeness between Arjun and Rohan that she had not initially understood. Her testimony was careful and factual, describing only what she had personally seen and heard. Additional witnesses, including neighbors and colleagues, confirmed Arjun's unusual routines and the irregular timing of late-night activity around the household. Arjun's defense counsel attempted to frame the incident as a tragic accident born of emotional stress. They emphasized his lack of premeditation and the panic that ensued when Rohan threatened exposure. Counsel argued that while Arjun had made errors in judgment, there was no intent to harm Rohan fatally. They highlighted his cooperation in providing accounts of events despite being under immense emotional strain, and presented him as a man overwhelmed by circumstances rather than a deliberate criminal actor. However, prosecutors countered with a focus on Arjun's behavior following the incident. They stressed that concealment, deletion of digital evidence, and obstruction of initial welfare checks indicated a deliberate attempt to evade responsibility. The discrepancy between Arjun's calm explanations and the physical evidence recorded on the security camera reinforced the prosecution's narrative. The fatal outcome may not have been planned, but the ensuing actions were calculated and obstructive. Throughout the proceedings, Maya remained present in the courtroom. She listened intently as the intricate details of deception, secrecy, and emotional manipulation unfolded. For her, the trial clarified the scale of the events inside her own home, confirming the suspicions she had quietly carried for weeks. She observed not only the evidence itself, but the stark contrast between Arjun's controlled demeanor and the reality presented through objective digital and forensic proof. By the end of the first phase of the trial, the case was no longer just about a tragic accident. It was a study in secrecy, concealment, and the consequences of emotional decisions compounded by deliberate evasion. The courtroom had become the stage where every detail Maya had observed in her home was now formally scrutinized and documented for judgment. After 6 weeks of testimony, presentation of evidence, and cross-examination, the trial reached its conclusion. The judge reviewed the detailed findings, including the security footage, digital evidence, forensic reports, and witness accounts. While the court acknowledged the absence of premeditation in the fatal altercation, it also recognized the seriousness of Arjun's actions following the incident. The deletion of messaging apps, removal of call logs, and evasive behavior all demonstrated awareness and deliberate concealment. The judge delivered the verdict. Arjun was found guilty of manslaughter. The decision reflected both the reckless actions during the confrontation and the subsequent efforts to hide critical evidence. During sentencing, the court highlighted the importance of accountability, not only for the tragic outcome itself, but also for the pattern of deception that followed. The custodial sentence aimed to balance the absence of premeditation with the deliberate attempts to evade responsibility, emphasizing that emotional panic could not excuse concealment or misdirection. Maya, who had attended every session of the proceedings, remained quietly observant throughout. She listened as timelines were reconstructed, messages and call records were analyzed, and the intricate web of secrecy within her home was laid bare. Each piece of evidence she had noticed firsthand, late-night whispers, subtle shifts in routines, and hidden communications, was confirmed in court. For Maya, the trial provided both validation and closure, though it came at the cost of confronting the full extent of the betrayal within her own household. Following the sentencing, Maya made the decision to reclaim control over her environment. The property was formally transferred to her, but she chose to sell the house. The memories, tension, and events that had transpired within those walls were inseparable from the space itself. After the sale was completed, she arranged to leave Canada, carrying only a single suitcase, determined to sever remaining ties with the place where her life had been disrupted so profoundly. Her departure symbolized both an escape and a fresh start. Maya later reflected that the decision was necessary not only to distance herself physically from the traumatic environment, but also to begin rebuilding a sense of normalcy and security. By leaving, she created space to heal, removing herself from reminders of betrayal and loss while embracing the opportunity to start anew elsewhere. Though the case was legally resolved, the emotional and psychological impact lingered. Maya's meticulous observations and cautious intuition had been validated, demonstrating the importance of attentiveness, awareness, and courage when confronting the unknown. The story of Rohan's arrival, the growing secrecy between him and Arjun, and the tragic outcome had forever altered her perspective on trust, family, and vigilance in her personal life. The story of Rohan's brief stay in Brampton, the escalating secrecy, and the tragic outcome left an indelible mark on everyone involved. For Maya, the experience became a lesson in vigilance, intuition, and the complexity of human relationships. She realized that small, seemingly insignificant details, the direction of shoes, the subtle rhythm of footsteps, the careful deletion of digital evidence, can carry far more meaning than they appear to at first glance. The case also highlighted the dangerous consequences of secrecy and emotional entanglement. What began as a familial obligation, a cousin offering temporary housing, spiraled into a series of decisions that ultimately ended in death. Emotional pressure, fear of exposure, and attempts to conceal actions compounded into tragedy. Arjun's choices demonstrated how panic and secrecy can escalate a situation beyond anyone's control, even when the initial intent is not to harm. From a broader perspective, the investigation showcased the power of modern digital forensics and careful police work. Metadata, router logs, deleted messaging applications, and even subtle behavioral patterns provided crucial insights that pieced together the events surrounding Rohan's disappearance. Each piece of evidence told a story, confirming that human intuition, when paired with diligent investigation, can uncover truths hidden behind carefully constructed facades. For the extended family and community, the case served as a reminder of the complexities that lie beneath ordinary routines. On the surface, Arjun and Maya's life had appeared stable, predictable, and uneventful. Yet beneath that structure, tensions, secrecy, and unspoken dynamics quietly developed until they erupted into irreversible consequences. It was a sobering illustration that appearances can be deceptive, and that vigilance, both emotional and practical, is essential when dealing with relationships, especially in situations involving trust and dependency. Maya's decision to leave Canada, selling the home and taking only a single suitcase, reflected her desire to regain control and reclaim her life. By choosing to start anew elsewhere, she distanced herself from a place that had become inseparable from trauma. Her departure was not just physical, it was an emotional and symbolic act, affirming that healing often requires leaving behind more than just a house. It sometimes requires leaving behind the memories, relationships, and unresolved tensions tied to a space. Ultimately, the tragedy of Rohan's death and the subsequent legal proceedings underscore the fragile line between routine and disruption, secrecy and truth, trust and betrayal. Maya's careful observations, courage in seeking help, and commitment to justice ensured that the truth was revealed, even when it was difficult to confront. The story stands as a cautionary tale, emphasizing the importance of attentiveness, integrity, and timely intervention, as well as the profound consequences of choices made in fear, secrecy, or emotional desperation. Even after the trial ended, the events continued to resonate, not only in the legal record, but in the lessons learned by those directly and indirectly affected. Maya's experience reminds us that awareness, courage, and careful attention to subtle details can make the difference between clarity and catastrophe. The house in Brampton may have been sold, and the physical traces erased, but the lessons of vigilance, intuition, and accountability remain timeless.